Hi everyone, and welcome back to Season 8 of the Propcast. I'm Louisa Dickens, your host of the Propcast and co-founder of LMRE, the global PropTech recruitment and search consultancy. The aim of each episode is to introduce you to a PropTech innovator and discuss how their work has created a shift in focus when it comes to digitalizing the built environment. If you're interested in finding out more about PropTech or applying for a job in this space, or keen to know who the big players are that are moving and shaking the real estate industry, we have you covered, and we'll be bringing you an episode each week to connect you to the VCs, PropTech startups, and real estate professionals from around the globe. Today on the Propcast, we'll be finding out what initiatives work in hitting DEI targets and how to avoid tokenism in real estate. Now, we're lucky enough to be joined by two of the leading women at Nuveen, Jeanne Casey and Jacinda Lofland. Welcome to the show, Jeanne and Jacinda.
Thank you so much for having us, Lou. Very excited to be here. Thanks, Lou. Really happy to be here.
On this podcast, we'll be covering what led Jeanne and Jacinda to the innovation, sustainability, and technology space at one of the largest real estate investment managers globally. Jeanne and Jacinda will explain what works in creating a diverse and inclusive and therefore powerful team, but also how to avoid the issue of tokenism. They'll elaborate on Nuveen's strategy and investment decisions and how ESG, technology and community play a part in all of it. Lastly, they'll be giving us some home truths about what they think needs to change in terms of adoption and integration. And without further ado, I would love to start with obviously hearing from the ladies about how they even got into this space, their roles. Let's start off with Jeanne, who I first met through, actually I met both of you through Xander from Metaprop, who likes to be called Mr. PropTech. Now, Jeanne, I met you when you were obviously on the VC side. Talk us through your whole sort of journey to this space.
Sure. And shout out to Xander, Mr. PropTech. So I've been in venture capital for just over 10 years. And about half that time I've spent focused on PropTech, most recently at Metaprop. Throughout my career, I've always been really interested in industries that tend to lag others in terms of digital transformation. So I started my career investing in fintech at Morgan Stanley back in the early 2010s when fintech was in its early days. I was then part of a fund that spun out of Cisco and was on that founding team investing in digital infrastructure, including smart cities and IoT. And that's what led me to PropTech. I thought those areas of venture were really fascinating and undergoing a lot of rapid change. And I just joined Nuveen as the global head of PropTech and innovation 6 months ago.
Awesome. And congratulations on that move. You've got a big job ahead of you. Now, Jacinda, obviously we also met through Mr. PropTech, but I was fascinated by your background. So you obviously worked in real estate sort of financing, spent some time auditing with the likes of, PwC, but then you went to like a fast growth tech business, Lena, which for those listening, it's like, how can you describe it? It's like a network of living spaces for digital nomads. And then you moved back to a slightly more corporate, but obviously equally in a great business, Nuveen. And in a completely different role, which you're focusing on community, ESG, different sort of capacity, depending how you want to go from the beginning or you want to work backwards. I don't know, but I'm fascinated by this.
Yeah, thanks, Lou. I think I'll just go sequentially just because it is all over the place a little bit already, as you pointed out. But I did start out in PwC and I worked mostly on commercial real estate clients. And that's what my forte into the space. My first stint with TIAA was back in 2013. I did commercial mortgage originations as well as equity investments on the West Coast. And that was before we were sector specific. So I had an opportunity to look at lots of different types of assets. Left San Francisco and Nuveen to move to Buenos Aires, Argentina. And I did that.
You say it.
Yes. After living there for a little while, I better be able to say it halfway correct. But yeah, so I moved there. I didn't have a job, but I actually got really lucky and was the first finance hire for a company called Remote Years. So that was the first startup that I worked at. And I built out and managed the finance team there for a couple of years. Remote Year organized programs for digital nomads. So we had teams on the ground in different cities across APAC, Europe, and Latin America. And we'd hook up our cohorts with accommodations, co-working space, and then also had programming in place for both networking and cultural socialists. So really great exposure, obviously a ton of fun too. I got to travel a lot while I was working there. And then, like you said, I worked for Selena as well, which I describe as like very similar, like the WeWork of hospitality, if you will, going into kind of underutilized hotel buildings, reconfiguring so that there's more space so that you've got apartment style as well as dorm rooms. And so I worked on the real estate team there for a little bit and then came back to Nuveen in a very kind of nebulous strategy and innovation role. And then we hired Jeanne to focus more specifically on the VC innovation and prop tech side. And so now I've gotten to focus a little bit more on customers and community and really just the experience of our end users. And then also, as we'll get to, engaging around ESG with those.
Yeah. Well, I think on my side, I've seen it fascinating to see a lot of people used to do some of the roles you're doing almost like part-time. So say the head of asset management investment would spend time looking at ESG or solutions or tech or yeah, all those sort of components. And now in the past like few years, and Jeanne, I'm sure you've seen this, people are now being properly allocated these roles. I think last year in 2021, we saw a 30% increase in ESG consultants. It was a 26% increase in ESG analysts. I think it was a 20% increase in innovation. I should probably go back and check our data, but that's a huge amount. And obviously I know you guys are probably going to be looking to grow your team as well, but it's so good to see businesses taking it seriously and allocating proper like man and women power to look at these processes. It's going to determine how we run and operate all our buildings and obviously hit these targets, which we're going to go into later. Let's move away from the numbers. And let's talk about another hot topic, diversity. It's obviously well known that a diverse team creates, I guess, more better sort of thinking styles and visions, and will bring deeper discussions, more innovative ideas, solutions. Jeanne, from your sort of 10 years experience in this, what do you think can really be done to sort of attract more diversity to this space?
Beyond just attracting and recruiting diverse talent, I think the crux of the issue is also, and I think most importantly, around retaining and promoting and really genuinely empowering diverse talent that's already within the organization. And that diversity from the top down and throughout the ranks was actually something that attracted me really deeply to Nuveen when I was first interviewing. So for the first time in my career, I'm actually reporting to a woman, actually 2 women, I should say.
Maybe it's time we go into a little bit more about what Nuveen doing in terms of their hiring themselves. I've obviously spoken how there's an increase in talent worldwide, but specifically for Nuveen, Jacinda, what's the whole structure of the team with you? Obviously, I know there's Abigail, who's another leading woman in your team, but talk us through it.
Yeah, absolutely. So just a little bit of context, not a sales pitch, but just so that the listeners know, Nuveen is a large investment manager that has over $1 trillion in assets under management. And then about 140 billion of that sits within Nuveen Real Estate. And that's globally and then across different sectors. So your 4 main sectors: housing, industrial, office, and retail, and then a growing presence in alternative areas like healthcare, investing, and single family rental. So that's a little bit of background about the company. And then Jeanne and I sit on our strategic insights team, which is led by Abigail Dean, as you said, Lou. And the team includes our research team, as well as sustainability, as well as prop tech and innovation team of 1, Jeanne Casey, and then customers and community, another team of 1, Jacinda Lofland. But we all work really closely together. And I know later on, we're going to get into our vision around tomorrow's world, but that's how we're structured. And to your point, Lou, I just think it's so important that sustainability is not a side job. We continue to build out our team as well as interactions with the asset management team and really having this be top of mind. It's not something that you can do with just a few extra hours. It really is, for Nuveen Real Estate, a top priority.
Yeah, it's a full-time job and it's passion. I find that lots of people are looking to obviously move into having more of an impact in their role, and people coming in from cross sectors as well. So no, it's a fascinating time for the ESG side, particularly within real estate. We all know that figure, about 40%.
Hey, it's Michael Beckerman, CEO of CRETEC and CRETEC Climate. I hope you'll join us in Copenhagen for our first dedicated climate event on May 17th through the 19th. Only 200 of the world's leading sustainability professionals will be on hand at this event to connect, exchange ideas, and be inspired by world-class speakers. For more information, please visit our website, cretechclimate.com.
Now, moving away from these numbers, let's talk about the diversity topic, which we all know diverse team creates more into thinking, solutions. Jeanne, you've had 10 years in this space. Obviously, Jacinda just said that you have obviously a lot of women leadership at Nuveen as well, which is slightly unheard of or not, and doesn't happen the whole time within real estate, especially not in the innovation space. What do you think can sort of be done to increase that?
I think it's beyond just attracting and recruiting diverse talent, retaining and promoting, and maybe most importantly, empowering that talent that already sits within an organization. That was actually what really attracted me to Nuveen in the first place. So for the first time in my career, I'm actually reporting to 2 women. Those are the first 2 women I've ever reported to. And it's really exciting, fresh change of pace. The first 4 interviews of the dozen or so that I did with senior executives across Nuveen Real Estate, of the first 4, 3 were women and 1 was a person of color. And I really liked those ratios because they represented what our senior leadership team actually does genuinely look like. And those ratios, I think, make our DEI initiatives more powerful because they're more genuine and actually reflect what our teams look like.
Yeah, it's interesting what you're sort of talking about, especially when it comes down to retention and what we see people now obviously looking at EVP, like employee value proposition, and a lot more people looking for how they're treated. Obviously, the culture's been a massive thing, especially since we've had that more, I guess, flexibility. But since post-pandemic, I use that term lightly, people are really looking at it, and also people looking at the sustainability aspect as well. So almost about like healthy experiences within buildings and basic employee sort of well-being, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, financial, all these things. But yeah, if you look at those things opposed to just looking at sort of 20th century where it's like pay, benefits, like it's completely different how you sort of retain them. And as going on to your point about senior management and who hired you, Jeanne, that's a huge thing. It's like, how invested are you? And leading from the front and having that diverse senior management team. So actually delving into a little bit deeper, Jacinda, obviously from more of a real estate side, because you've obviously had that experience yourself. What have you sort of seen in terms of sort of diversity and inclusion?
Yeah, I think we're making meaningful progress. It's really great that there have been a lot of reports. A McKinsey top comes to mind around the benefits of diversity, right? And so I think that's well established, but not necessarily well practiced in everybody's day to day. And I think it's important to just kind of admit and talk about the fact that people naturally gravitate towards other people like them, that think like them. And especially when hiring, it's normal. There's confirmation bias of wanting to validate the opinions that we already have, and the availability heuristic, and just being able to pull the information that, is available in our heads, but is such a small subset of what might be the relevant factors. And so I think implicit bias training has been a really important step for us. And I think that is something that is great and should be ongoing in a lot of organizations, to just say, hey, this doesn't mean you're a bad person and that you're intentionally trying to exclude people, but we do have these human biases that might not be opening up opportunities for everybody in the way that you think. And so obviously with hiring, that's super important, but I think the role of a company is to give people the knowledge and resources to proactively challenge their thinking day to day, right? In every single decision, and how we're managing assets or investments that we're looking at, and what the teams look like. So I think that's an important part of the conversation. Some of the things that we're doing at Nuveen Real Estate, I think it's important to hire outside of the same sets of colleges that might have strong finance or real estate programs. So we've reached out to a number of HBCUs and are working with students there that are studying engineering, math, economics, and related fields. So really trying to open up with HBCUs and just other universities in general, maybe not just the Ivy League or the top colleges, but there's a lot of great candidates that really do have diversity of thought coming from everywhere across the US and across the world. I'm a big advocate of case studies as a part of the hiring process, because I think it's really important to give people an opportunity to demonstrate their technical skill set. So maybe the resume doesn't, read the same way as someone else's, but if you give them the opportunity to show them their work product, I think that's really powerful. And the feedback that I've gotten from a lot of the managers within Nuveen Real Estate is that the case studies that we've rolled out have been a really important piece of their hiring process. And then as Jeanne said, I think retention is arguably more important, right? Because the stats that we're seeing are that as you move up within companies, there's less diversity on executive teams and things like that. Obviously, that we do have good representation at Nuveen Real Estate, but always striving for kind of better there and good accountability with the numbers. So mentoring programs, we've got business resource groups for people of different backgrounds. And for Black History Month, for example, last month, one of our BRGs hosted a number of sessions. And so that was really great. And then I think just having candid conversations. So we set up a separate Nuveen Real Estate specific Black History Month. We watched a great movie. It's a little under 20 minutes. It's on segregatedbydesign.com. So yeah, less than 20 minutes, but it really does talk about how real estate and housing policy have historically played a really big part in segregation. And so as real estate professionals, we have an opportunity to acknowledge and then try to counteract that in years to come. So dedicated time with a smaller group with the Nuveen Real Estate of people that were interested in talking more about that and just having candid conversations about our history, the things that we want to change, and then how we can incorporate that into our day to day. Yeah, I could go on and on. I think it's really great.
I love this, Jacinda. And the more we say, I can feel the audience writing this down. It's the first time when I've asked this question that someone's actually given active examples and case studies of what they're doing, what they're implementing, what works, what they've seen. A lot of people, it's almost they're yeah, we're just going to start rolling this out, but little action is being done. So I'm in awe of everything you just said. And it's good to finally hear it. And I know people will be listening and writing it down and right, let's try this out.
Awesome. Okay. Well, we talked about attraction. We talked about retention. Education, I touched on this before, but education in and outside of the firm. So again, implicit bias trainings, having this being part of conversations with leadership as well as middle management. And then another thing that we're doing is we did a mentor program with a company called Project Destined. And that was something that I was involved in. So a group of us mentored students from Compsci High in the Bronx. And I think providing those sorts of opportunities like Project Destined does to help high school students understand that there are careers available in commercial real estate. I think specifically people of color, that's not always something, if you've got families that have worked in commercial real estate for a long time, that's how a lot of people have been in the business historically. So really just opening up that career opportunity to people, letting them know that that's something that they can pursue. And so we did a number of different classes with the students there. And I think that's a big piece of it as well. I love that investors are asking about diversity representation in their DUs. So that's holding all of us accountable, which is really great. And then benchmarking, right? For 2021, there was a global real estate DEI survey released by ULI, NACREIF, PREA, NAREIM, and some other groups. And I think that they got 175 responses. I'm looking at the numbers here, representing more than 435,000 full-time employees in real estate that were managing more than $2.4 trillion. Just some of the high-level takeaways from that, 92% of firms do have a DEI program or initiative, which is a good first step. 58% of global full-time employees in commercial real estate are men. And then this is where you start to see some of the challenges that we'll have to work collectively as an industry to rise to. But when you start moving up into the more senior positions, like I said, that's where you see less and less diversity. So the percentage of female board of director members was 26% in APAC, 21% in North America, and 14% in Europe. And then
was that 40 or 14?
14 in Europe. I know that surprised me. It surprised me that Europe was at the bottom there. And then 31% of North American employees are professionals of color, but only 15% at the executive management level. So that just speaks to some of the challenges and exactly what Jeanne touched on, attraction and retention, and really empowering growth and opportunity into all levels of the organization.
Do you know what worries me quite a bit about that as well? And it's great that you and I spent time to get that data. I don't think the organizations that don't have a DEI, everything in place, would respond to that. They wouldn't paint them in the right line. I don't think going out this, because I think, was it 98% or something like that? I mean, that's in the 90s. That's pretty high. And I'm struggling with that stats. I want to believe it. And I think maybe it'll get higher, but I've just reckoned a few organizations haven't responded on that, but we can make some changes. Hopefully they're going to do this a yearly report, and maybe we do another podcast to see where we're at this time next year.
The first really important step forward is collecting all of this data, because you can't manage something or work to improve something that you're not measuring. So I think I've seen this in venture capital the last 5 or so years. There's been a lot of focus on women and minority founded funds. And those data points have been tracked much better over the last few years. And we've seen a real big push in new emerging managers that don't look like, the previous generations before them.
Hi, I'm Anthony Slumbers from the Real Innovation Academy, home of the future-proof real estate course designed to accelerate your real estate career. To learn more, please visit realinnovationacademy.com/LMRE for details and a 25% discount.
there's anything more you want to delve into about what you've seen, I guess, since your 10 years in this space yourself, sort of, Jeanne, from whether it's like a VC or sort of corporate side or maybe within the startups?
I think it's not too dissimilar from real estate. And we've gone through so many awesome stats. Thank you, Jacinda, that I'm not going to regurgitate a ton more. But I would say I've seen a lot of genuine improvement over the decade I've been in the space. I think 10 years ago, I've always been at the intersection of finance and technology, and both of those are historically very male dominated, very white dominated, a little bit older traditionally field. I think that's largely, or at least in the process of changing quite a bit. I find boardrooms and investment teams look quite a bit different than when I started just 10 years ago. But I think, of course, there's still a long way to go in terms of improvement.
Yeah, at least changes are happening. Now, in January this year, Nuveen published their real estate themes for 2022, and one of them was Tomorrow's World Showing Up in Today's Investment Decisions, meaning structural changes in demographics, technology, and sustainability, which sit at the core of Nuveen Real Estate's Tomorrow World investment strategy. Now, I'd love to hear from both of you, maybe Jacinda, you can kick us off, what you're sort of particularly focusing on. Obviously, your role covers quite a few things, so please talk us through a bit more about the focus for 2022.
Sure. Yeah. Like you said, our Tomorrow's World strategy, there's 3 key things that we focus a lot of our time on. So sustainability, and huge shout out to our absolutely amazing sustainability team who I get to work with. Technology, Jeanne will talk to us about that a little bit more. And then demographics, or in my case, when you think about, demographics is what our research team spends a lot of time on, kind of thinking about where people are moving and why. But then at the local level and in managing an asset, people kind of comes down to community. And so that's what I'm spending a lot of my time on. We have what we call a Smart Sustainable Building Blueprint, or fondly our SSBB. And that has a number of categories that we think really tie to those 3 overarching themes, but categories that are really important for any sort of building of the future. So energy, water, waste, resilience, health and wellness, tenants and community, leasing, and then data and digitalization. A couple of the things, essentially the SSBB has a number of features that we think are either essential, value additive, or maybe more something that is newer and that we'd want to pilot. For each of our sectors, we've built out a different blueprint. And then that's how we're tracking our operational progress in those areas. And it also is, as a little side note, how we're collecting data for our GRES submissions, or the Global Real Estate Sustainability Benchmark. So to get a little bit more tangible, a few things that I'm working on: ESG engagement. So really opening up the conversation around energy use, and as well as health and wellness with the end users of our buildings. So we've put together a green community guide that has best practices of day-to-day living and things that residents in multifamily assets can be doing, and little behavioral changes. And then we're also working on green guides, commercial green guides for some of our other sectors. So that's just some examples of us wanting to provide information on best practices and really open up that conversation. Health and wellness, obviously super important. So Nuveen Real Estate is a Fitwell champion, and we surpassed our goal of getting 8 Fitwell certifications by the end of 2021. And then,
amazing. Congrats.
Thank you. Thank you again. Big shout out to our sustainability team, and also our great asset managers and property managers. But we've also committed to registering 20 more buildings and certifying 13 more over the next couple of years. So we want to really build on our partnership with Fitwell. And then they have a separate viral response accreditation that kind of lays out steps to mitigate viral transmission. And nearly 30 of our office buildings have achieved that accreditation, and we're working towards our full office portfolio doing that. So those are some of the health and wellness things that we're working on. The last thing I wanted to touch on is just tenant satisfaction surveys. And I think that it's something that a lot of people in the industry have been doing a while. You might have heard people working with Kingsley to do. We're re-engaging with Kingsley this year. And I just think really trying to re-explore what we're trying to get out of the surveys. I think it started to become a little bit of a check the box exercise, or there was so many questions that we weren't getting that many responses, and then too much data to make any sense of. So we're really trying to shorten down our surveys, explore ways to make them more tech enabled. So not just emails going out, but maybe QR codes that people can be scanning as they're walking into the building, and hit on the things that are the most important to our end users, and then dig through the data and find ways to act on it. So I think that might be a good kind of transition over to Jeanne on some of start to get into the tech world a little bit, but I know Jeanne's working on some other great stuff.
Yeah. Happy to start getting into some of the tech priorities. So I guess backing up a little bit, when I first arrived, again, coming from venture capital and seeing a really high volume of all these new technology companies serving the real estate industry specifically, to be totally honest, I had pretty low expectations because so many of the companies I was working with on the VC side had a lot of trouble selling into and really articulating their value proposition to the right people within the right places in these very large, or usually very large, sometimes medium-sized real estate organizations. So when I started at Nuveen, I quickly found out that really wasn't the case. And that really puts a feather in the cap of our asset management teams who are piloting a really wide variety of property level technologies. I was really impressed. They were referencing companies that they're working with that I had never even heard of. And I thought I'd heard of pretty much every PropTech startup out there. The space is so dynamic and changing every day that they continue to teach me things. So that's been really exciting. So part of my role is helping to source cutting edge technologies that maybe they haven't come across yet and to filter those to the right people within Nuveen. And then also take those learnings and understandings of where our greatest needs are and feed them into venture capital investment theses. And so we'll be launching a VC strategy in the coming months. And so that's really exciting. And I'd say if I had to boil it down to two overarching themes across most of what I'm working with our sector teams on a day-to-day basis, they'd be a data strategy and tools and new technologies that help unlock our own proprietary data across our massive portfolio and help us incorporate third-party data sources to improve our investment and operational decision-making is super top of mind for us. And then the other area is one that we've been constantly talking about for the last half hour or so, and that's the intersection of sustainability and ESG with PropTech and technology more broadly. So that's a major focus in every sector, both at the property level. So whether it's measuring and managing energy use, or at the enterprise level, tools to help us report back to our investors what those metrics are. There's a wide recognition that technology is going to play an outsized role in achieving fairly ambitious net zero carbon and other sustainability goals. And so that is also a very high priority area for us.
Yeah, you touched on a lot there. And I'm sure when we come down to the LMRE part, you can give a couple of shout outs to maybe some products which you're piloting or just following in the space. Before we do that, obviously, this is the last question. And again, you feel free to sort of kick us off. We kind of went into it a little bit. But what you think the industry could do better as a whole to move things forward in terms of adoption and integration? You said you were pleasantly surprised by whether the asset management or sustainability team is doing in terms of looking at technologies and using it and everything like that. Is there anything else, any sort of things you think as an industry we need to sort of change?
Yeah, I'm pleasantly surprised, but also I think incentives alignment is an area that is still fairly nebulous. And I would guess that's not just a issue at Nuveen. There's so many layers within the real estate industry. And that's something that I've really come to appreciate more specifically in my transition from venture to inside of the real estate industry. We work with so many third parties that operate our properties, JVs across different fund mandates we have. There's just a lot of cooks in the kitchen and a lot of competing incentives. So something that we're doing internally, and I'll shout out to you, Jacinda, here, because you've been spearheading this by and large, but cascading goals around our own compensation targets that are specifically tied to sustainability and innovation goals, I think is a first step that's going to be really impactful to making sure everyone across the organization is incorporating new ways and new tools, new ways of doing things and using new tools to do those things in their day-to-day work. And as Jacinda said, I'm a team of one right now, soon to be a team of two. So very exciting. It's ridiculous almost that innovation is outsourced to just me. This has to be part of everyone's job. And I think it starts with, top-down kind of incentive alignment.
I completely agree with that. Lovely shout out to Jacinda. Jacinda, is there anything else you think we could all do to maybe quicken up this digitalization?
One quick comment. I think rethinking how our buildings work, but also rethinking how we work. And when I'm talking about that, I'm thinking of enterprise tooling. So another is to our relatively new CTO, Chris Zesis, and his team, Sean and everybody else, because our capabilities and how we're working and this enterprise systems that we have and really thinking through data strategy and kind of better leveraging the proprietary data is just a huge piece of it. But I think that there's some things that when I was working at Text, the pace of play of work and how transparent and visible, and whether it's Slack or Teams or whatnot, people really had access to the latest information. And coming back into a larger company, I can really acknowledge that I do think it's harder to change within institutions rather than starting brand new. But I do think that we're moving in a direction where our pace of play is going to pick up, and we've just got the right enterprise tooling to get information to that are making relevant decisions real time. So that's another thing that's really exciting.
Yeah, going back to what you said about your compensation being tied to targets. I've obviously been in conversations with HR, different heads of business about this for years. It's good to know you're actually the first business that I've actually heard it's going to happen. So we'll be looking and asking the question if it's happening in other sort of big investment managers across our space.
Hi, I'm Nelson from Property Quants. We run a hands-on, in-depth course that will teach you to apply data science and machine learning to real estate. To learn more, visit propertyquants.com/training. We also run a revolutionary course that will allow anyone to gain data science skills without needing to learn programming. To learn more about that, visit thenocodecourse.com. On either site, be sure to key in the code LMRE5 for a special 5% discount.
Unfortunately, we come to obviously the final part, which is the LMRE part. We both give each other and some people special shout outs, but it doesn't mean we can't do more. So the more the merrier, I say. Share the love. Okay, so let's do the L part. Touch upon the main lesson you've learned throughout your career and what tips you'd give to someone, say, joining this space. Who would like to go for this? Jeanne?
Sure. So this might be a little counterintuitive, but I would say throw out your 5 or 10-year plan. And I say that because we're taught to plan, and planning is great. And I have a 5-year plan internally or professionally and even personally. But I found that the most exciting opportunities professionally have come to me. And looking backwards, my career path has made a lot of sense. But every twist and turn wasn't necessarily what I had planned years before. And so I'd say rip up that 5 or 10-year plan. Good things can happen.
I love that. Right. We come to mention anyone products shout out. I'm sure you both have a few more. Jacinda, anyone you want to give a shout out to or product? Obviously, you love the sustainability team. You love your new CTO. Hit us.
Lots of love over here, Lou. Lots of love. Yeah, the other shout out, I mean, Jeanne and I have both talked about it, but our asset management teams and then the properties that sign up and do pilots, right, are guinea pigging these things and really helping the startups just as much as the startup is helping them in those early years. So definitely a shout out to them. And then specifically in New York, I really want to give a shout out to the Cushman and Industrials team there. We have completely revisited and rescoped what property management looks like, and Cushman and Industrials partnered up there and are just really going above and beyond when it comes to tenant engagement and experience and a number of other things. So it's really exciting to start from scratch a little bit there and say, hey, okay, old property management agreements, this isn't really hitting on everything that we need. We need help with these sustainability initiatives, and especially in New York with Local Law 97. We need to work together on that. We want to do more for our tenants and offer additional services. Big shout out to our New York team there, and very excited to see what we continue to do with that group.
I love that. Jeanne, what about you? Is there a startup tech company you're loving at the moment? Anyone to give a shout out to?
Oh man, I feel like we've just been chock full of shout outs, but I will echo Jacinda's shout out to our asset management team across all sectors. It's been an absolute pleasure working with my Nuveen colleagues.
Okay, right. Final 2 questions. What's been the most rewarding part of working in this space? Who wants to go for that one? Jeanne?
Sure. I love real estate and prop tech because I love seeing the tangible impacts on the ways that people work and live and spend all of our time.
And now, Jacinda, what are you most excited about? Surely it's got to be something to do with hitting these ESG targets and everything like that.
Definitely my nerdiness is going to come through here, but data standardization, I'm actually really excited about some data standardization, meaning that we collect it in similar ways and don't have to do it 10 different times. Climate tech, obviously, we talked about that. And then our impact team has done a lot of really cool stuff around resident services that we'd like to scale. So I'm really excited about what they've done and hoping that those are services we could bring to more residents throughout our portfolio.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Jeanne and Jacinda, it's been a pleasure having you. I feel like we could actually carry on this podcast for so much longer. And I feel there's going to have to be a sequel maybe. But thank you both for joining me. It's been a pleasure. And I'm looking forward to catching up with you after the show.
Thanks so much, Lou. This has been fun.
This is awesome. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us this week on the Propcast. And a big thanks to our guests and our sponsors, Cretech and Reamtech. Make sure you visit our website, lmre.tech, where you can subscribe to our newsletter, keep up with our industry news and events, or if you're looking for your next career move, it's all on there. The Propcast can be found on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube, where all good content is found. Whilst we're at it, if you found value in the show, we'd appreciate it if you could spread the word and tell a friend about it, or even write us a review. And I'll catch you next week.
Making high-quality podcasts like this takes a lot of work. That's a fact. But not when you hire Copus. With our white glove experience, we handle everything for you, from guest outreach all the way through publishing and promotion. We handle it all. You show up to hold great interviews like these and build relationships with your guests. We take care of everything else. Podcasting is not just about the audience. Every podcast interview is the start of a brand new relationship. With a weekly podcast, you would build relationships with 52 ideal partners or prospects through podcast interviews over the next 12 months. Do you believe 52 new relationships could grow your business? We do. Why not contact me today, jason@copus.com, JASON @KOPUS.com, and let's talk.